Hello, welcome to Focal South episodes. Today is special because I'm on a train from London to Stansted Airport. I just went for a 1 week trip here in London to attend workshop on Platform Without Borders. And I have so many things in my mind right now to reflect, but maybe for this episode, I want to share about one of the common themes that I found during discussions with other Global South scholars on platform research. So, one of the common themes that repeating is about informalities. To an extent, we give meaning to informalities, workers, or platform jobs because mostly platform works like online taxi drivers or delivery workers, care workers all came from informal sectors in the context of global south countries like in Southeast Asia, in Africa, as well as in Latin America. So what I found or what I think is important is that we might have a different understanding on informalities because if we look at the experience in European countries or in the UK, informalities, yeah, we're gonna just put it here. Sorry. Informalities are somewhat seen as the negation of formalities. So they are sort of like two category of formality and informalities in job sectors. But the case in most of global south countries, informal jobs, informal workers are the nature, the dominant nature of platform work. So, and then this is also, I think, the idea is that if we take the logic or binary logic of formal informal division in a European context, we will missing a lot of um, nuance or contextual understanding of platform jobs in global south countries because uh, because what happens in the global south countries is that informal doesn't mean the subversions or the last category of formal jobs because first they are mostly the dominant sectors. Like for example, in Indonesia, number of informal workers are more than 50% in compared to formal workers. So in that sense, I think using this binary framework of formal and informal will not be suitable to use for global south context. And the questions then, what should we do about it? So what? So I'm actually now developing a paper together with college from Buenos Aires, Denis Kasparian, also other college from the Netherlands and also from Kenya. We are developing paper to discuss about decolonizing this gig economy. How do we decolonize it? And I think what do we argue is that first we need to have recognitions. I think we need to have a recognitions that the binary logic of formal and informal work
We are now
jobs
approaching
is not
Harlow
working.
Tap.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stop there a bit. And then it gives me more reflections. I think this is also appear in the workshop. Most of us also agree that when we want to discuss about platform job in global south, we need to start from understanding the history of informal sectors in this context. Like, for example, in Indonesia, before the innovations of online taxi like Gojek and Grab, there are already informal motorbike taxi, which are very much the dominant sectors. So when this digital innovation of app came to Indonesia, they are actually tapping this informal job. And what happened is that many formal workers changed their uh, professions into informal drivers. And that creates a bit of inequality because for formal workers, now they have two options whether they want to stay in their formal job or they switch into informal jobs. But for drivers who came from informal sectors, they don't have options to uh, they don't have options to choose a formal job because mostly didn't have university degree or high school degree. So that's the
Welcome to this
other
service
factions,
for Stansted
mean that
Airport. The next stop will be Stansted Mount Fitchett.
which mean that one of the main challenge is that, or one of the main questions is that how can we have more options for informal workers? We're discussing about social mobility for informal drivers. How can we also give options to informal drivers to work in the formal sectors? And how can this digital innovation helps them or support them in having more options? And I also remember uh, uh, some a paper work from my college. Mohtar Habibi, he is Indonesian's scholar work on
Welcome to this service
social
for Stansted
injustice.
Airport. We will be calling at Stansted Mount Fitchett and Stansted Airport.
So in his, he is actually sharing
The
his.
next stop will be Stansted Mount Fitchett.
Thank you. He's actually sharing his view on the relations between formal workers and informal workers in Indonesia. He said that actually the formal workers owes a lot to the informal workers because informal workers has become a backbone of urban infrastructures. So he's talking in the context of Jakarta, where most formal workers are actually sort of like corporate corporate officer who barely have who barely gain minimum wage in Jakarta. But the living cost in Jakarta is very high due to these gentrifications, meaning that the formal workers only have limited income, but they also struggles to fulfill their living costs. And that most of their strategy, for example, to get transportations, to commute to work, or to have a lunch, dinner, they will go to informal services or informal job. Like for example, they will choose a motorbike taxi to go to commute instead of buying cars because they can afford to buy cars. Or to get lunch, for example, during the office, they will not go to restaurant or like big malls because of course it's costly. They will choose small informal warung or like small informal restaurant which offer more affordable lunch. This is quite interesting because sometimes we took this condition for granted. We took as if this is like a symbiosis between those white collars workers and these informal workers. But imagine if all of these informal services or informal sectors is never there. Like here in Europe, for example, it will be very difficult to find somebody who sell drinks or meals on the train like this. But that's not the case in Indonesia. It's super easy to find food everywhere because people are taking cart, giving, how to say, it, strolling cart and sell these meals and drinks everywhere. So imagine if Jakarta is like London, for example, we cannot find any food, any, drinks, these informal warungs. Then with the minimum wage in Jakarta, people will be more difficult or maybe might not be able to survive from the high living costs in Jakarta. That's, I think, also very important point of view to look at what is actually the relations between formal and informal workers. So there is sort of like actually subtle dependencies between from the formal workers to informal workers. So I think I'm just gonna leave it there. So the idea is if we are doing work on digital platform or doing work on gig economy, this theme topic of informality should be centralized because this is like this is like something that is under the blanket of the whole narrative main story about platform out there, and we might missing a lot of dynamics and nuance if we don't take into account the informalities, informal workers, informal governance, informal sectors that is supporting this platform innovations. So thank you for listening.